The President. Questions. Question 1, Dr. Johnny Ng. President, it has been reported that due to geopolitical changes, certain foreign governments often impose sanctions on the Chinese government, including cutting off the export of certain technological products to China and banning China's use of such products. There are even hackers in Western countries waiting for opportunities to launch cyber attacks on China in attempts to affect the operation of the Chinese government and related organizations, and Hong Kong may also be affected. On strengthening information insecurity in Hong Kong, will the government inform this council? 1, whether it has assessed the impacts of the aforesaid restrictions imposed on technological products and cyber attacks on the information security, including computer systems and applications of various government departments, and what plans are in place to strengthen the information system security and incident response capability of various government departments so as to ensure that their operation and services are not affected. 2, how it detects and blocks foreign hackers' intrusions and attacks targeting the computer systems of various government departments, and whether it will formulate the relevant management, technical and security mechanisms. And 3, given that cyber attacks may undermine the operation of critical information infrastructure, causing chaos to the daily lives of members of the public and bringing about economic impacts, whether the government will regulate the cyber security standards for such infrastructure and require infrastructure operators to assume greater cyber security responsibilities. Thank you. The Secretary for Information and Technology. President, I'm most grateful to Dr. Ng for his question. The question attaches great importance to information security, including cyber security. We have been tackling information security issues through a multi-pronged strategy to mitigate the risks brought by cyber threats. Bureau and departments, BDs, actively implement multiple layers of security measures to monitor, detect, and block potential malicious attacks on their information systems and networks, and take commensurate measures promptly to ensure the security of the government's systems and data. We also closely collaborate with related organizations and departments to enhance the overall defense capability and resilience of Hong Kong against cyber attacks and strive to build Hong Kong as a safe and secure smart city. Having consulted the Security Bureau, my reply to the questions raised by Mr. is as follows. 1 and 2, the government has been closely monitoring the trends of cyber attacks and associated security threats around the world to ensure the continuity of normal operation of the government's systems and services. In procuring information technology IT equipment products, government departments place high importance to the security standards and support services offered by their suppliers, in addition to functionality and compatibility. Moreover, we also remind departments to procure IT and communication products from diverse sources so as to manage the risks of potential restriction imposed on technology products. In light of targeted and organized cyber attacks on a global scale, the Office of the Government Chief Information Officer, OCSIO, has formulated a comprehensive set of government IT security policy and guidelines, which are reviewed and updated regularly with reference to the latest international standards and industry best practices. All BDs must abide strictly by the policy and guidelines to ensure the security of government's data and information systems. OCSIO also regularly conducts compliance audits for BDs to ensure the compliance of the information systems with relevant security requirements. On technical aspect, the government commits itself to the overall information security measures to respond to all types of cybersecurity threats. Leveraging on modern cloud technologies, the government launched the next generation government cloud platform in September 2020 to provide a more secure, reliable, and scalable IT infrastructure for the digital government services of different departments. The platform has so far supported over 350 digital government services. At present, the government websites and systems have adopted multiple layers of security measures, including data encryption, firewalls, content delivery networks, scrubbing, intrusion detection and prevention systems against distributed denial of service DDoS, anti-malware software, endpoint protection solutions, and real-time monitoring tools, etc., to detect, block, and tackle different types of security threats. In addition, the government also implements spam filtering systems to tackle malicious email attacks. On the other hand, in order to respond to emergency incidents effectively, OCSIO has established the Government Computer Emergency Response Team Hong Kong Hong Kong CERT to assist and coordinate departments in handling the work of computer emergency response and incidents. OXIO also organizes interdepartmental cyber security drill annually to strengthen the capability of government departments in defending and responding to cyber security incidents. Meanwhile, the government attaches great importance to the cooperation and information sharing of the mainland and other regions on cybersecurity in order to respond to the cybersecurity threats in a prompt and timely manner. OXIO has joined the Forum of Incident Response and Security Teams and Asia-Pacific Computer Emergency Response Teams, etc., and is working closely with the National Computer Network Emergency Response Technical Team Coordination Center of China on exchanges, cooperation, and notifications of cybersecurity intelligence. We also actively participate in related activities organized by these organizations. A safe business environment is crucial for fostering economic development, prosperity, and stability. Critical infrastructure are of great importance to the normal operation of society. If the information networks or computer systems of critical infrastructure are being disrupted or sabotaged, the normal operation of their facilities may be affected and will seriously jeopardize the economy, people's livelihood, public safety, and even national security. The increase in cyber attacks in recent years has brought substantial challenges to the cybersecurity of critical infrastructure around the world. Currently, Hong Kong does not have specific legal requirements on cybersecurity of critical infrastructure. Therefore, in addition to industry best practices as well as guidelines and requirements imposed by individual regulatory authorities, the government is making preparatory work to clearly define the cybersecurity obligations of operators of critical infrastructure through legislation to strengthen the relevant cybersecurity. In forming relevant cybersecurity standards, reference will be made to standards adopted by other jurisdictions and internationally. The government intends to launch a public consultation exercise by the end of this year. Here, I would like to thank Dr. Johnny Ng again for his question. I look forward to more exchanges and cooperation with members of this council so that together we could enhance the cybersecurity in Hong Kong. Dr. Johnny Ng. Thank you. Now, in restrictions on the use of technological products, how do you make sure that the computer systems of departments are not affected because there may be ban on use of relevant products? Do you have any contingency plan in place so that government services will not be affected or even halted altogether? Now, we've not been informed by any BDs that there has been ban on technological products used by government departments in their systems. We are closely monitoring the development around the world. We'll make sure that there is normal operation of government services and systems. Our policy is that we will go through an open, transparent, and fair, competitive bidding system to procure the necessary equipment. As we procure the necessary services and equipment, there is the OXIO that has agreement. OXIO, there's an agreement on making reference to the international standards for procurement. And then we will also state the relevant specifications of systems and services. This is to make sure that the products are safe to use and they will ensure cybersecurity for government systems. Now, OXIO will consider the functionality, compatibility, and relevant security standards, and also support services provided by the suppliers. And then we also remind departments to procure IT and communication products from diverse sources so as to manage the risk of potential restriction. In fact, our country has seen rapid technological advancement. So in our procurement, we could include many of the technological products now produced by our country. For example, Huawei, Lenovo, and so on. They all are very competent companies with a strong base in Hong Kong. That's why as we procure products, we do have adequate sources of supply, and we can make sure that as we choose products, they meet our functionality, compatibility, and security requirements. Thank you. Mr. Chan Hock Foong. Thank you, President. Now, of course, the big countries are at odds, and then there's now pressure imposed on Hong Kong with sanctions. This will become a regular scenario. And so it may affect our upgrading of software, maintenance and repair of systems and so on. So do you have any standards and guidelines? So for some of the softwares with high security requirements, for example, for servers used in Hong Kong, you consider using mainland products to make sure that technological products used by the government will not be affected by sanctions. Thank you, Mr. Chen. As you mentioned, Mr. Chen, in our procurement policy, we will have regard to the market situation and the relations among countries. We'll make sure that the products we procure have enough compatibility. But so far, at this point, we've not been informed by any BDs that their IT or computer systems have been affected by sanctions on certain technological products. But we will closely monitor the situation. And also, in this agreement on service and so on, there are enough safety requirements and follow-up support services requirements. So if there would be any change in the supply scenario, we will be able to use compatible products and ensure government systems will work normally. Mr. Michael Look. Unfortunately, in the government's reply, we are not really convinced that the government is well prepared for sudden scenarios. No, because of geopolitical tensions, Western countries are trying to, impose pressure on our country. They will find any reasons to ban the supply of technological products. So cybersecurity is an important aspect of national security. I would like to ask if the government will consider testing mainland produced or Hong Kong produced products or products with open source data, for example, Huawei and so on, so that you will be prepared for possible risk instead of just telling us you make preparation. But you can't just pay lip service to making preparation. If you don't test out certain products, how do you know they'll be compatible? Secretary. Well, as Mr. Loke mentioned, what Mr. Loke mentions what exactly we're doing. With different critical infrastructure and government systems, we will have full assessment of risk in the choice of products. Of course, under one country, two systems, Hong Kong is the most international city in the country. So we have considerations about considering covering the best available products. But of course, as we do so, we'll consider stability, national security, which is of course of utmost importance. So you can rest assured that we are certainly well prepared, and we have put in place relevant measures to make sure that our infrastructures are properly protected. Ms. Carmen Can. Last year, the Canadian government followed the suit of the UK and other countries, and then on the grounds of national security, they banned telecommunications companies in Canada to use the new 5G equipment and services produced by our country. And then for existing systems, they have to be removed by a certain deadline. So for telecommunications system, are there any national security risks? When we use overseas made systems, do we regularly assess the national security risks? Do we have such expertise to do that? Secretary, thank you, Ms. Ken. Now, in the overall IT information security policy, we have regular audits, and the audits covers a wide range of issues. Now, of course, as Ms. Ken pointed out, we have to have regard to the developments around the world, and in terms of our information security, we attach even greater importance to that. And in response to Ms. Ken's question, not only are we prepared as we implement various measures, we will consider the variety of products that and we'll consider their safety and stable supply and so on. But we must stress that we have to strike the right balance. We want to make sure there is information security in Hong Kong at the same time. under the one country, two systems, as the most international city of the country, we will be able to consider sources of supply of the most state-of-the-art equipment and so on. Mr. Kenneth Lau. Well, there's rapid development in information technology, at the individual, business, and country level. There are more and more cyber attacks. There are new ways, new modus operandi from time to time, and that poses a serious threat to cybersecurity. So the government needs to strengthen our information security to make sure that our networks and systems are safe, and then we won't become a loophole in national security. So as you make the various preparations you mentioned, how do you also ensure the privacy of individuals, especially regulating overseas platforms from doxing? Secretary. Now, with rapid technological advancement, the country is doing, in the country is doing great in terms of information security. It has enacted laws, and also there are various regulations and laws on information security. So, in the light of the development of the country, our government is also moving in tandem with such development. And for our critical infrastructure, we have enhanced the information security. Perhaps Mr. Au could supplement. Undersecretary for Security. Thank you, President. Thank you, Mr. Lau. Now, under the Security Bureau, we are actively working on cyber security law. We're making the necessary in-house preparation. And in 7 areas, we're going to strengthen information security. First of all, for critical infrastructure, there will be a prevention mechanism. Secondly, we need to formulate a network security plan. And thirdly, there has to be regular safety assessment. And fourthly, there has to be comprehensive emergency response plan. And fifthly, there must be regular drills. And then sixthly, and there must be recovery functions. That's the 6th point. And 7th point, there must be swift notification system. So when we have formulated the relevant measures and policies, we plan to consult the Council and the public by the end of this year. Thank you. Mr. Chen Su-hong. Thank you. I'm glad to see that government is making preparations to formulate to draw up a law on cybersecurity that covers both public and private facilities. I know that the government has set up the Hong Kong the Government Computer Emergency Response Team Hong Kong under OXIO. And then the OXIO also organizes interdepartmental cybersecurity drill annually to strengthen the capability of government departments in defending and responding to cybersecurity incidents. Apart from that, before the relevant legal legislative exercise is completed, what arrangement do you have in place to respond to this incident? Secretary, as Mr. Chen pointed out, in terms of information and cybersecurity, we have a system to help individuals and businesses with prevention or protection measures. For example, Mr. Chen mentioned the Government Computer Emergency Response Team Hong Kong, and also the Hong Kong Internet Association has provided support services to SMEs too. And then the police, of course, is also works closely with OXIO on cyber security and technology. Now, one of the important functions of Hong Kong CERT is to liaise with mainland and international counterparts so that they could identify loopholes at the first instance. If there are any incidents on the mainland and other places, we will be informed about that, and then we could make preparations. making reference to this incident. And then the Hong Kong CERT would also analyze information received, and then it would be passed on to different organizations for them to be prepared. So in other words, we have a joint effort in protecting cyber security. This will make sure that Hong Kong remains at the forefront in terms of cyber security protection standards. But of course, we need to do more. And so in terms of cybersecurity laws and infrastructure and protection of critical infrastructure, the country does very well on that. And that's why in the Security Bureau, they are working now on a law, and then they will be consulting you at the end of the year to make sure we do an even better job with cybersecurity. Thank you.
Question number 2, Ms. Jovi Chen. President, there are comments that currently offline fundraising activities like flag sales or lottery ticket sales may only be carried out after the applications have been vetted and approved by government departments. However, there is no dedicated legislation or departments that regulate such activities, resulting in a situation that fundraising activities are regulated offline but not online. It has been reported that during the 2019 riots, people who conducted online fundraising illegal activities that endanger national security. In this connection, will government inform this council, 1, whether it has compiled statistics on the number of online fundraising activities allegedly for Hong Kong affairs in each of the past 5 years, and among the activities, the numbers launched via crowdfunding platform and the social media accounts, of the amount of funds raised and the number of activities where organizers had made public the amount of funds raised. 2, whether the government will consider establishing a standardized regulatory mechanism for online and offline fundraising activities. If so, when will the proposals be submitted? 3, as it is learned that some carried out public fundraising under the guise of selling things like meal, vouchers, and gifts, how will the government prevent such activities? SFST. President, first, I thank Ms. Jovi Chen for raising the question, giving us the opportunity to explain the approach the government adopts in regulating such activities. Any funds raised, transferred, or used, whether through internet or physical means, must abide by the law. If any person or entity engages in illegal activities, such as money laundering, fraud, theft, acts, and activities that endanger national security, or incite, aid, abet, or provide pecuniary or other financial assistance or property for other persons to commit offenses endangering national security, he or she would be subject to criminal liability, including fine and imprisonment, in accordance with Organized and Serious Crimes Ordinance, Drug Trafficking Recovery of Proceeds Ordinance, Theft Ordinance, and the Hong Kong National Security Ordinance. In addition, financial service-related activities involving an offer to the public for purchase of securities and money lending are regulated by the SFO and the Companies Winding Up and Miscellaneous Provisions Ordinance and the Money Lenders Ordinance. We, however, note that many online crowdfunding activities of diverse purposes have emerged in Hong Kong in recent years. While we have the law specified above, we do not have a dedicated legislation or department or regulatory authority to deal with the various kinds of online crowdfunding. In this connection, I remarked last week that the government has been reviewing the regulation of crowdfunding in order to provide clearer regulatory requirements and to strengthen the transparency and accountability of crowdfunding activities to prevent illegal acts and protect public interests. We plan to conduct consultation this year, which will cover the specific contents of future regulatory framework, including scope of crowdfunding activities to be regulated, regulatory requirements applicable to different types of crowdfunding activities, such as whether application, registration, disclosure, and account auditing, etc., is required, and the fundraiser of crowdfunding, as well as the corresponding legislative work, regulatory agencies, and enforcement arrangement. Regarding Ms. Chen's question, in consultation with the SB, my reply is as follows. 1. As it is now not always necessary to make prior application before the conduct of online crowdfunding. The government doesn't possess a complete set of data. However, law enforcement agencies, in the light of actual circumstances, have constantly been monitoring the situation for any illicit fundraising activities and taking appropriate enforcement actions. For example, in the past 3 years, the police have investigated and made arrests for those who were suspected of using funds gathered from online crowdfunding for illegal activities such as money laundering and fraud. The arrested persons were suspected of using the proceeds raised from the crowdfunding for purposes different from the proclaimed purposes, and instead for personal consumption, investment, and entertainment, or raising funds by impersonating social welfare and educational institutions. The government will continue to combat illegal use of proceeds raised from online crowdfunding. 2. At present, fiscal fundraising or is subject to certain regulations. For instance, a permit must be obtained from the Director of Social Welfare or the SHA, depending on whether the fundraising activities is charitable or non-charitable in nature, in accordance with Section 417 of the Summary Offence Ordinance. In addition, the government has implemented a series of administrative measures over the years to enhance the transparency of charitable fundraising activities to safeguard the interests of the donors. When formulating our proposal, we will make appropriate reference to the above measures and consider the relationship between the regulatory arrangements for fundraising and crowdfunding activities conducted in different modes and the consistency of the measures and protect public interests. The consultation we plan to conduct this year will cover these issues. 3. There are 4 common types of crowdfunding activities. In addition to the financial-related ones, such as equity crowdfunding or peer-to-peer lending, there are also crowdfunding which Ms. Chen is concerned about, including donation-based crowdfunding, whereby funds are raised for making donations to charitable organizations or other causes, such as making donations for political activities, and reward or pre-sale based crowdfunding, whereby fundraisers provide goods and services in return for funds provided by the contributors. The above 4 types of activities fall under the scope of our review, and we will put forward the corresponding regulatory recommendation in public consultation later this year to avoid any person making use of the fraudulent crowdfunding for potentially illegal purposes. Ms. Jovi Chen. Illegal fundraising, like the 612 Humanitarian Relief Fund, is suspect. Will this be looked at by the national security body to make sure the people will not be raising funds to engage in activities against national security? Secretary. Ms. Chen's question highlights the complexity and the diverse nature of the situation. In the entire regulatory framework, who's going to be responsible for the implementation? Now, this is what we are looking at. We have to cover various aspects. We have to look at the existing legal framework. Like I mentioned in the finance-related matters, we do have the regulations. And who's going to be enforcing the law? Now, this is also part of our review. And I hope the members will give us some time. We're seeking to complete the internal study within the third quarter, and the consultation will be launched in the fourth quarter. Ms. Alice Mack. President, in the early part of 2020, I put a question about crowdfunding, and then I put the question a number of other times. I think that this is the third and the fourth time that this question is raised, but we are hearing the same reply, with the only exception that later on this year there is going to be a consultation exercise. My question for the Secretary is this. Now, you have the Undersecretary for Security with you. There are so many people who are resorting to crowdfunding to raise illicit money. Why is it that you're still doing consultation without taking any action. How soon are we going to see legislative provision? When you enact the law, will you be consulting the SB as to what difficulties they're facing in law enforcement? And how are you going to get on with the enforcement? How are you going to get on with the legislation? Secretary? Well, on many occasions, I've already addressed this question here in this council. The existing arrangement is not so much a free-for-all. We like to enhance the measures. We are communicating closely with the Security Bureau to identify the situations that have to be considered. In our principal reply, I already said that for certain crowdfunding activities, there are requirements to fulfill. For finance-related fundraising, we do have a regulation. It's just that the online crowdfunding activities, there are indeed certain situations where we should do a better job. That's why we are initiating this review in response to members' concerns. We are working hand in glove with the Security Bureau. The review is being undertaken. However, the enforcement work is still also going on. Perhaps I defer to the Undersecretary for the details. Undersecretary for Security. President, as the Secretary said a moment ago, in the course of enacting legislation, the Security Bureau is fully involved and also gave our input. As regards the law enforcement, I can let members know that during the Black Clad riot and also in the course of investigation into cases that endanger national security, we fully take advantage of the power conferred upon us by the legislation. All these laws are mentioned in the principal legislation. We also have the Hong Kong National Security Law. There are 3 cases in the context of the NSL that we discovered online fundraising, and the funding was actually used in acts that are against national security. Also, there is a mention of money laundering, theft, fraud, and so on. In the course of investigating the Black Clad violence or Black Clad riot, there are 5 cases in which the crowdfunding proceeds that were used for criminal ends. The National Security Department and the other police divisions are working very hard to bring these criminals to justice. Mr. Duncan Chiu. President, about 7 or 8 years ago, I set up the crowdfunding association together with the IT people. We made the point that there should be legislation governing crowdfunding. For the IT sector, this is a very important means that there are different types, like the equity crowdfunding, the donation, and so on. In the mainland, there is the relevant legislation, and licenses have been issued. Like Lu Jinsuo, in 2016, President Obama wrote out the relevant act that governs the kind of platforms and that will be allowed and to safeguard public interest. However, in Hong Kong, we have so many reports. We have reports put together by the Hong Kong U. Since the FSDC has published a report in 2017, we haven't heard of the issues since. Now, we are worried that people are taking advantage of crowdfunding to engage in illicit or illegal acts. We have missed a lot of opportunities over the years. I urge the administration, since we have so many discussion documents and so on, to get on with the legislation for crowdfunding. Secretary, Thanks very much for the comments. Our positions and the direction do not differ. That this is an important issue. We do have legislation, but there are gaps in this regard, and we have to make sure that we can identify all these gaps and then have to be plugged, and we have to ensure that there is consistency with the other legislation. The other thing is the international experience, as alluded to by the member. We will all take into account of this, and also the timing. We are working very hard at the present moment to get on with the advanced study, and this will be completed in Q3. By Q4, we will be putting out the consultation document. Dr. Tan Yue-Heng. Thank you, President. I think in terms of crowdfunding, there should be some supervision. As the online crowdfunding, there ought to be proper regulation to govern these, and we have to publish all the way to regulate crowdfunding. Other than the IT, other than the monitoring of the platform, I think we have to look at this from the financial point of view. We have to guard against money laundering. We have to start with this money monitoring angle and monitor the situation, regulate the situation accordingly. If the crowdfunding of a certain scale exceeding a number of people, we have to deal with this in a particular way. We have to make sure that they will be properly licensed and subject to regulation. So my question is, that the government, in terms of cooperation with the financial organization, have you conducted any consultation to bring this kind of crowdfunding into the regulation? Thank you very much for the question. In our internal study, like a member said, we do cover a wide variety of aspects, like the implications of the law on the financial institutions and how we can interface with them. So as a next step, we have to look at the idea of licensing these crowdfunding activities, and other than the front-end license, we have to consider the funds raised. And this is precisely what Dr. Tan is concerned about. And should people register themselves in crowdfunding, now, this is something that we have to take into account. And third, how can we have a reporting system after crowdfunding, and how can we report all these suspicious crowdfunding activities? We have the front-end licensing, and then we have the registration of the crowd fundraiser and the subsequent reporting requirement. All of these will be looked at in the consultation exercise. Thank you, President. I support the idea of regulating the crowdfunding activities, and I welcome the consultation. But there are certain crowdfunding activities that are of emergency nature, like the treatment of illness and so on. If people have to register and obtain prior approval, and this would be time-consuming, it would affect the treatment of the patients. Now, for emergency crowdfunding, can there be any exemption measures? But at the same time, we have all the safeguards against abuse. Secretary, President, well, Mr. Chen talked about the charitable crowdfunding for treatment, that this is nothing new. This is happening offline as well. For offline fundraising, it depends on whether this is of a charitable nature. We do have a registration system. Now we are dealing with online crowdfunding. How can we come up with something which is feasible, and how can we tie in with all the rest of the system? I'm sure Mr. Chen will be concerned whether this new system will have certain implications on the economy. That's why we need time to conduct the study, and we will be coming up with the consultation this year for public consultation. Mr. Chen Hofeng, well, in the world, there are three types of control. The first one is the platform risk, like insolvency of the platform, and the fund raised will be used for other purposes, and the abuse of personal data, and also the imbalance of risk. That has the administration looked at other jurisdictions to learn from these places. Thank you. Thanks very much. The member has a point. I don't think we can work behind closed doors. We have to have regard overseas jurisdictions, like for investment type of crowdfunding, like equity crowdfunding and finance-related kind of crowdfunding. They will look at the risks to see whether there is any money laundering or any terrorist financing issue. If it is about investment, if it is about development, in the US and the UK, they do have the legislation governing these kind of crowdfunding to monitor the development. Now we have, if there is a crowdfunding activity which is merely donation, it would have to do with charity, and there is in other jurisdictions the specific officials are looking at these kind of donations. I think we have to have regard to our legislative framework and the local situation to come up with something which is consistent and sustainable and achieve the purposes that we set out to achieve.
Question 3, Mr. Chen Kwok-kwan. President, the Chief Executive announced in the 2021 policy address that starting from the 2022 to 23 school year, newly appointed regular teachers in public sector schools are required to pass the Basic Law Test, the BLT, in order to be considered for appointment. In this connection, will the government inform this council? 1. Whether it will make public the number of teachers who obtained a pass in the first round of BLT held in January this year. If so, of such number, together with a breakdown by type of newly appointed regular teachers, that is, newly joined teachers and in-service teachers who are changing schools or switching to a regular teaching post, as well as the respective percentages of that number of past teachers in the number of teachers who sat for BLT and in the number of teachers in public sector schools across the territory. 2. Of the number in the second round of BLT held this month of those teachers who resat BLT as had not obtained a pass in the first round of BLT, and when the government will announce the results of this round of BLT. And 3. As some members of the education sector have relayed that May to July each year is the peak season for schools to conduct teachers' recruitment, whether it has assessed if the 2 rounds of BLT conducted so far for the government for teachers could meet the demand of schools. If it has assessed and the outcome is in the negative, whether it will consider immediately arranging additional BLT sessions and allowing teachers to submit their BLT results later on, so as to help schools rationalize the procedure for teachers' recruitment. If so, of the details, if not, the reasons for that. Secretary for Education. President, the Basic Law is the constitutional document for the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, which enshrines the basic policies of the People's Republic of China regarding Hong Kong. provides a solid constitutional basis for the implementation of the concept of one country, two systems, and the various systems in Hong Kong. It is closely related to our daily lives. The basic law has been a key element of the school curriculum. Students learn the related concept and its importance through diverse learning experience within and beyond the classroom. Besides, the words and deeds of teachers have a far-reaching impact on students' growth. Teachers should be committed to nurturing students into quality citizens with a sense of responsibility and national identity and affection for Hong Kong as well as an international perspective. In this regard, teachers should have a correct understanding of the basic law so that they could enlighten students and help them correctly understand the constitutional status of Hong Kong and develop positive attitudes towards the basic law and one country, two systems. We require teachers to have a clear understanding of the basic law and make it one of the entry requirements for teachers. Starting from the 2022-23 school year, regular teachers in public sector schools are required to pass a designated basic law test before they could be considered for appointment. This requirement is applicable to newly appointed regular teachers, including newly joined teachers, teachers changing schools, teachers switching to a regular teaching post from a teaching post outside the approved establishment, and monthly paid temporary teachers. Designated BLTs include the BLTs organized by the Education Bureau and the Civil Service Bureau, as well as the Basic Law and National Security Law test newly introduced by the CSB in June 2022. I'll reply to Mr. Cheung Kwok Kwan's question is as follows. To tie in with the above requirement, the EDB conducted 2 rounds of BLT on a pilot basis. The first round was held on January 8th of this year with around 5,400 applicants. Around 4,200 candidates sat for the test and the attendance rate was about 80%. Over 70% of the attendees obtained a pass result in the test, which was similar to the results of the BLTs conducted by the CSB. The second round of the BLT, originally scheduled to be held in late February, was postponed to May 21st in light of the severe epidemic situation. There were around 9,100 applicants and the attendance rate was about 80%. We are now speeding up the marking and checking processes, and it is expected that the test results will be issued to candidates starting from late May to early June. The objective of organizing the 2 rounds of the BLT is to help teachers who plan to join a school and those changing schools in the public school sector in the 2022-23 school year to fulfill the relevant requirement. The test results will be recognized regardless which rounds of the BLT the candidates joins or whether they join the second round after failing to obtain a pass result in the first round. Therefore, relevant data analysis on candidates of these 2 rounds of tests are not conducted. Persons who join the above BLTs are required to possess a bachelor's degree or equivalent qualifications. However, there is no requirement that they must be newly joined teachers or teachers changing schools. In fact, we do not have and will not collect data on whether they will apply for joining a school or changing schools, or whether they have successfully joined a school or changed schools. Firstly, most schools have not started their recruitment exercise for the 2022-23 school year. More importantly, it is not meaningful to provide such data as whether candidates of the BLT will apply for joining a school or changing schools, and whether their applications are successful depend on a number of factors. Currently, the BLT requirement is only applicable to newly appointed teachers within the approved establishment in public sector schools. As candidates who obtain a pass result may not necessarily join a school or change schools, it is not appropriate to compare the number of candidates passing the test with the number of teachers in all public sector schools in Hong Kong. The EDB will consolidate the experience gained from the pilot test, review in detail the relevant arrangements, including the mode of the test and the content of the test, and draw up the arrangements for the 2023-24 school year and thereafter. The EDB issued a circular to schools and a press release to the public on November 11, 2021, announcing the above BLT requirement and relevant arrangements. The arrangements for the second round test were also announced through press releases on January 20th, February 10th, and April 11th. The above documents were also uploaded onto the EDB webpage. When announcing the details of the second round test, we have clearly specified that it would be the last round of BLT organized by the EDB in the school year. As the test was postponed to May 21st due to the epidemic, application was reopened. For each round of application, while it was specified that the number of places was limited, we have arranged more test centers to provide more places to meet the needs of all the teachers. In the end, all applications were accepted. In other words, the EDP has announced clearly the test arrangements on many occasions and provided sufficient opportunities and places for interested applicants. Teachers who wish to change their working environment have been provided with ample opportunities to thoroughly consider if they would take the test. The 2 rounds of the test accepted a total of around 14,500 applications, and the total of attendees was about 11,480. In addition, if persons who wish to join a public sector school or to change school have obtained a pass result in a BLT conducted by the CSB or the BLNST it organized from June 2022 will be considered to have met the relevant requirement. We expect that schools should not have recruitment difficulties due to the BLT requirement. If there are special situations of individual schools, we will consider on a case-by-case basis. Thank you, President. Mr. Chan Kwok-kwan, according to current procedures, all newly joined schools and even temporary teachers must have obtained a pass in the BLT before being hired. But then at this stage, it seems that it's not applicable to temporary day teachers and also those who teach English as a native language. I want to ask whether you would take an incremental approach and gradually extend it to other schools, such as those under DSS or those in kindergartens and other teachers as well. Secretary, as Mr. Chung said, we have arranged for 2 rounds of basic law tests this year, after which we will conduct a review. We will review the model to see whether we would conduct the test on an annual basis. The CSB in its recruitment already requires a test on basic law and the national security laws test. Should we also do the same on the testing scope? Should we extend it to more schools, to DSS or subsidized kindergartens? We are also going to consider it in our review. We would also consider other teachers or teachers other than the permanent teachers. We can even extend it to temporary teachers. We would all consider this in our review. In general, we are going to gradually extend the scope of the test to different schools and also to different teachers. However, we are just going to do this in a gradual manner. Ms. Lillian Kwok. Thank you, President. I would like to ask the administration, we have received non-Chinese teaching staff with concerns because we do have a few schools who particularly take in non-Chinese students. The pass score may be low for those teachers. Have you considered this in your test? How many non-Chinese teachers have joined the test? Do you have any such figures, and do you have a passing rate of that? I'm sorry, you can only ask one question. Secretary. We did not analyze the background of the candidates. For non-Chinese speaking teachers, we do need such teachers as well. We provide both the English and Chinese version of our basic law tests. Non-Chinese speaking teachers can take the English test. Therefore, language should not pose an obstacle. We see that the basic law plays a very important role in our school curriculum, and we do need teachers to clearly guide our students. Therefore, even if they are non-Chinese speaking teachers, if they become permanent teachers, then they do have a responsibility to understand the basic law. For newly joining teachers who may not yet have obtained a pass in the test, and for schools who need more non-Chinese speaking teachers and yet they find difficulties in obtaining a pass on the test, we would consider it on a case-by-case basis as stated in my response. We provide a cash subsidy for non-Chinese speaking students, and very often we would also hire non-Chinese speaking teachers to help those students. We would ensure that there would be eligible teachers for those schools as well. Mr. Benson Look. Thank you, President. In the reply, it was mentioned that teachers must have a clear understanding of the basic law so that they could enlighten students and help them correctly understand the constitutional status of Hong Kong and develop positive attitudes towards the basic law in one country, two systems. I am in full support of it. But then in the basic law test, we see that it actually is the same arrangement as the basic law and national security law test. So 15 questions need to be answered out of 20 to obtain a pass rate. And so you need to answer 15 questions within 20 minutes and pass 8 of them. Well, when we see that for the transport department driving test, you need to do 20 multiple choice questions within 20 minutes, but you must answer correctly for 16 questions to obtain a pass. Would the administration consider that all teachers in future have to take another more detailed basic law test to ensure that they fully understand the basic law and could enlighten our students? Secretary. In the 2 rounds of basic law test, we made similar arrangements to the test given by the Civil Service Bureau. This is a pilot scheme. We believe that this is the quickest way in which we could set out such a test. In our review, we are going to consider the content, as in what is included in the test, and in the format. 15 questions too few? Should we increase the number of questions? We can think about it in our review. However, I must point out that our requirement is a basic requirement for newly joined teachers. Teachers and take 30 years of core training class in which basic law material is also included. Therefore, we are not solely relying on a BLT to assess a teacher's ability in guiding students. We also attach huge importance to our training to ensure teachers fully understand the basic law and the constitution of the basic law. We will continue to do that. Mr. Chu Kok-kon. Thank you, President. Well, we can be more down to earth. Many principals have forecasted that without another BLT test, it would affect the recruitment of teachers. However, the administration's reply is really disappointing. We hope that you would soon give us an update on exemptions to be made to the test. The actually, even if you obtain a pass, it's only valid for 1 year. Would you actually have it arranged so that it would be the same as the test under the CSB? Secretary, we know that recruitment for teachers in the new year usually occur from May to July. Well, for teachers who are recruited, then it's difficult to know whether they pass the basic law test or not. 14,800 candidates have already taken the test, and in November of last year, we already issued a notice, an announcement that this would be a requirement. So for teachers who are looking into changing jobs or switching to another teaching post, they already have ample time to make arrangements. In such a short period of time, I don't think we are going to hold another test, and we are not going to give out any exemptions. This is a basic requirement. We cannot just provide an exemption for teachers who are not prepared to switch jobs. If that's the case, the teacher can just stay in his or her original school for another year and take the test the next year. PE and music teachers may be difficult to recruit at during some period, but the schools have the discretion to handle this, such as paying an extra allowance. I'm sure that schools know how to deploy their staff. In my reply, I stated that under very special situations of individual schools, we'll consider on a case-by-case basis. But I must point out that this BLT is only a very basic requirement for teachers. We are not going to provide exemptions, but we are willing to consider allowing some sort of flexibility to schools if needed. Dr. Priscilla Leung, President, I would like to refer to the second part in the reply that the administration can consider making arrangements in the mode of the test and the content of the test. I did take a look at the contents in the test. The objective of the test is to enhance teachers' knowledge in basic law. However, I see that there is really no testing on the understanding of the basic law. It's mainly based on rote memory. I would like to know more about the mode and content of the test. Would you be willing to give up multiple choice questions and to focus more on the basic law as a constitution itself and how it relates to the mainland? Secretary, we're willing to consider that the first step we took was to set up this basic requirement for newly joined teachers, that they must have a basic understanding of the basic law. Currently, we have set it as the same standard as the test under the Civil Service Bureau. Teachers influence the students. Should we actually extend the scope of the test or make it more detailed? Where should we put the focus of our test? How to better assess the teachers? We are going to consider all that in our review. We will fully consider that.
Question for Mr. Ben Chen. President, The chief executive indicated in the 2018 policy address that Chinese medicine would be incorporated into the healthcare system in Hong Kong. However, there are views pointing out that there are currently only 10 odd Chinese medicine clinics, training and research centers in Hong Kong, providing government-subsidized Chinese medicine outpatient services, and the hospital authority is not seen to be actively integrating Chinese medicine into the healthcare system. In this connection, would the government inform this council, one, whether specific measures are in place to expedite the popularization of Chinese medicine, including drawing reference from the practice of the mainland to improve the legislation on and the system of Chinese medicine, especially a Chinese medicine authority introducing medical professional liability protection for Chinese medicine and strengthening Chinese and Western medicine integration and the patient's referral work in public hospitals too, as it has been reported that the leader of the mainland Chinese medicine expert group of the central authorities suggested earlier on that Hong Kong should build up the strength of the Chinese medicine departments and improve the Chinese medicine management institutions to cope with large-scale epidemic outbreaks, whether the government will consider formulating relevant policies to strengthen the role of the Chinese medicine sector in the anti-epidemic work, and 3, whether it would consider discussing with the mainland the setting up of a mutual recognition system for the registration of proprietary Chinese medicine so as to promote the flow of PCMs between the mainland and Hong Kong. Secretary for Food and Health. President, my consolidated reply to the various parts of the question raised by Mr. Ben Chen is as follows. The government has all along been promoting the development of Chinese medicine, CM, in Hong Kong. Further to the reaffirming of the positioning of CM in Hong Kong's development of the healthcare system in 2018 policy address, we have been working on various fronts in a progressive manner. As regards CM services, we have incorporated CM into the healthcare system through the government subsidizing defined CM services, which include 3 areas. Firstly, the 18 Chinese medicine clinics, training and research centers, CMCTRs, which operate on the tripartite collaboration model, have been providing government-subsidized outpatient services while continuing to provide a variety of CM service choices to the public. Secondly, to help gather experiences in the operation of integrated Chinese Western medicine (ICWM) and CM inpatient services, the Hospital Authority (HA) has been providing government-subsidized ICWM treatment services to HA inpatients of selected disease areas. With our efforts in actively pressing ahead with the development of the services concerned, such services are currently provided at 8 public hospitals covering all 7 hospital clusters. The HA will continue to explore enhancing the services concerned by increasing the number of participating hospitals and selected disease areas, as well as exploring the regularization of the services concerned. Thirdly, the construction work and preparatory work for commissioning of Hong Kong's first Chinese medicine hospital, CMH, has already been launched with a view to commencing the provision of government-subsidized inpatient and outpatient services by phases starting from mid-2025. CMH will also establish a collaboration platform with service providers, including the CMCTRs, to strengthen collaboration in various areas such as service development, patient circulation, and referral. The aforementioned 3 components are complementary in terms of service scope, which will provide a comprehensive network for the delivery of government-subsidized CM services. The government will continue to allocate more resources to promote the development of CM services. Meanwhile, with the support of the central government and the Guangdong provincial government, we have been actively strengthening Hong Kong's role under the blueprint set out in the construction plan for the Chinese medicine highlands in the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area 2020-25. Among others, mainland public CM healthcare institutions as pilot sites started to recruit Hong Kong Chinese medicine practitioners, CMPs, in 2021, enabling them to further their practice within the national healthcare system and nurturing more clinical talents for Hong Kong. As regards registration of proprietary Chinese medicines, PCMs, Hong Kong registered traditional PCMs for external use currently could be registered and sold in the mainland through the streamlined procedures, enabling Hong Kong PCM manufacturers to expand their markets, as well as creating favorable conditions for Hong Kong PCMs to go global in the long run. Regarding legislation and administrative structure, the prevailing Chinese medicine ordinance has already provided the regulatory measures in relation to CM practice and CM drugs. The Chinese medicine Regulatory Office of the Department of Health is mainly responsible for implementing the regulatory matters under the ordinance and providing support to the Chinese Medicine Council of Hong Kong. Over the years, the government has been reviewing the prevailing legislative provisions and its implementation from time to time, making amendments as necessary. The Chinese Medicine Unit has been established under the Food and Health Bureau since 2018 to coordinate and promote the development of CM in Hong Kong at the policy level. The Chinese Medicine Development Fund, CMDF, was officially launched in mid-2019 to provide financial subsidies to the CM sector to promote the talent nurturing, research and publicity in order to generate impetus for CM development in Hong Kong on all fronts. During the COVID-19 epidemic, CM has played an important role through in-depth participation in the whole process of epidemic prevention, treatment and rehabilitation. On prevention, the CM sector has been promoting anti-epidemic knowledge to the public through different means. To fully support the CM sector, the CMDF has expedited the handling and accorded priority to the vetting of subsidy items in relation to anti-epidemic work. CM has also played an instrumental role in the multi-tiered triage system. The HA has been implementing the special CM program for COVID-19 inpatients since 2021 to allow ICWM to give full play to strengths in anti-epidemic treatment. Meanwhile, the government has also been stepping up the use of CM in various establishments such as community isolation facilities, holding centers and residential care homes for the elderly, as well as offering CM support to persons under isolation or quarantine and the general public through providing consultation and advice services, distributing anti-epidemic PCMs, etc. The government has also coordinated the CM sector to mobilize its resources to take forward various work, including launching the Fight the Virus Together Chinese Medicine Telemedicine Scheme through the CMDF to subsidize CMPs to provide free of charge telemedicine services, as well as dispensing and delivery of CM drugs. CM has clear advantages in rehabilitation. The HA launched in 2020 the special CM outpatient program to provide free of charge CM rehabilitation services to patients who have been discharged from hospitals and persons who have completed isolation at the CMCTRs. The Hong Kong Special Administrative Region government is much grateful to the central authorities for sending the mainland CM expert group to provide guidance during the fifth wave of the epidemic. During its visit, the expert group gained thorough understanding on the actual application of CM in Hong Kong's anti-epidemic work and provided valuable feedback to further enhancing Hong Kong's CM anti-epidemic capabilities. The government will, on the basis of the recommendations put forth by the CM expert group, closely collaborate with stakeholders of the CM sector to further widen the use and application of CM in Hong Kong with a view to promoting the long-term development of CM in Hong Kong. Thank you, President. Mr. Ben Chen, thank you for the detailed response. On government subsidizing Integrated Chinese Western Medicine, ICWM, with the active promotion of the government, now there are 8 institutions with ICWM. Now, when we talk about ICWM, we've been talking about it for over 2 decades, and we've been talking about inpatient services with ICWM for over a decade. And now we have over 40 public hospitals, only 8 hospitals have ICWM. Just so you can see for how proactive the government has been in promoting ICWM. Now, CM's services defines CM services shouldn't just include 3 types such as stroke and so on. There are many more other diseases that could be covered, but the government was not moving at all further ahead. So the government is moving really too slowly in promoting CM development. And then we have this Chinese Medicine Council committee was set up, but then the government has not really been. Mr. Ben Chan, please come to your question. So, okay, I'll come to my question. Now that we have Chinese Medicine Regulatory Office is to oversee regulation. It's not about promoting development. Now, the mainland CM Express have asked us to improve the system, so I propose setting up a Chinese Medicine Development Council. How come it's not possible? Now, you say you have input from experts and then you have discussions, but is that enough to resolve the structural problem? Is it true that you don't need a Chinese Medicine Development Council? Secretary, thank you, Mr. Ben Chen, for your questions and your comments. Let me explain the work of the Chinese Medicine Regulatory Office. It's not just responsible for regulation. We also have the Chinese Medicine Unit under the Food and Health Bureau. So the Chinese Medicine Regulatory Office of the Department of Health is responsible for regulatory matters. But as for the Chinese Medicine Unit under the Food and Health Bureau, is responsible for overseeing the development of CM in Hong Kong. And of course, we have unit, Chinese Medicine Development Committee. The secretary is also under the Chinese Medicine Unit. And apart from the Chinese Medicine Unit, of course, we have a Chinese Medicine Hospital Office. So we have another team of colleagues responsible for promoting Chinese medicine hospitals. So we have the Chinese Medicine Development Fund that subsidizes various projects, and also when it comes to liaison with the sector and how far we can take CM development and so on. Well, I can tell Mr. Chen this. First of all, we are well aware of the situation. We're in control of the situation, rather, and also we're actually promoting the development of CM. And during the epidemic, we have had many meetings with the Chinese Medicine Development Committee, and they held actually a global forum, and we actively supported and took part in that forum. In terms of hospitalization service, rehabilitation services during the epidemic, we are promoting the use of CM. And of course, when the epidemic eases, we will be working even more actively to promote CM development. As I mentioned, there will be collaboration with GBA and so on. And then during the fifth wave of the epidemic, mainland CM experts rendered us much invaluable advice. And we are actively taking on board those advice. Now, I may not have covered all the work we're doing in the main reply, but actually we are working very hard on that. Thank you. Mr. Kingsley Wong. Thank you, President. I agree. We need to have specific measures to speed up the promotion of CM development. In Western medicine, there is some kind of a scheme to introduce the use of Hong Kong devices, registered Hong Kong devices on the mainland. And then there is also speeding up of the approval of Hong Kong PCMs on the main in GBA. But most Hong Kong people actually have not benefited from this measure. 2 years ago, there was a press conference on the construction plan for the Chinese Medicine Highlands in the GBA 2020-25. So under the plan, by 2025, there will have been in place a GBA CM healthcare collaboration system involving Guangdong, Hong Kong, and Macau. So what is the progress so far, especially in terms of creating a system and sharing in all the healthcare services? Now, how could Hong Kong people benefit from the collaboration of such CM efforts? So to put simply, what are the benefits to Hong Kong residents in such collaboration? Secretary, well, Mr. Kingsley Wong very accurately explained that we attended the press conference on the publication of the construction plan for the Chinese Medicine Highlands in the GBA 2020-25. Now, under that framework, there are two areas. One is PCMs, how Hong Kong PCMs could go into the GBA market. And under the plan, on the 31st of December 2021, we made an announcement that free Hong Kong PCMs for external use registered in Hong Kong have been approved for use. And then by April this year, there are in total 5 types of Hong Kong and Macau PCMs for external use of high quality, which have been approved for marketing, for sales on the mainland through streamlined procedures. Second question, Mr. Kingsley Wong asked how Hong Kong residents could benefit from such collaboration effort. Now, first, about Chinese medicine practitioners. Under the same plan, they could now practice in public CM healthcare institutions on the mainland. About 10 CM practitioners are practicing in the GBA. Of course, they could serve GBA residents at the same time. They will help to train talents for our CM hospital. Mr. Lam Chun Sing. Thank you, President. The government provided 10 free of charge Chinese medicine consultations to confirmed patients, but because of limited capacity, many were not able to make appointments. And now, by 2025, our CM hospital will start operation. Now, have you done any assessment, say, for CM services or ancillary allied CM services such as massage, acupuncture and service and so on? Is there any development on those fronts too to tie in with your development of CM services? Secretary, now in our first CM hospital, we have done assessments on various fronts in terms of manpower and so on. And we're not just talking about CM practitioners, we're talking about the whole team, frontline staff, CM care, CM dispensers and so on. We've been doing assessment all along. We have to have regard to the number of beds we have. You have to consider the special services, for outpatient clinics, and what is the capacity and so on. So we have to consider the talents we need. Now, we have the Chinese Medicine Development Fund, and under the fund, that could help to promote the development of CM hospitals and talent training. Now, in the past 2 years or so, we have been in an epidemic, and now we're not able to go to the mainland because for most of the training programs is a joint effort with mainland Chinese medicine hospitals. So with the resources available, it's a matter of timing. Now, we have mainland CM experts who came to Hong Kong during the 5th wave of the pandemic. We discussed the matter with them again. So when the epidemic eases or stabilizes, then we could send people to different mainland CM institutions for training. In particular, we could send them to Guangdong province because now we have come to know better our counterparts in Guangdong. So we could send people to Guangdong hospitals for training. And in terms of number, we have done some assessment. Maybe in Hong Kong, we don't have training in a particular specialized area, then we will planning to start such training. There are institutions taking care of such work. So we will proceed with our timetable to train talents in preparation for the opening of the CM hospital in 2025. Thank you. Mr. Lee Chen Kung. I want to ask about the Chinese medicine unit. Many in the CM sector have been asking what the CM unit has been doing. They've been asking the unit to help to allow CM practitioners to, write laboratory test notes, but it's still not possible. And then there it seems that there are laymen, regulating practitioners. Now, would you promote testing and certification of PCMs and so on? Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Lee, for your question. Mr. Lee is right to point out that we have a Chinese medicine unit, but apart from that, we also have the Chinese Medicine Regulatory Office under the Department of Health. The Chinese Medical Council of Hong Kong will work with this office to look at regulatory matters, and they also provide support. Since 2018, we set up the Chinese Medicine Unit, and at the policy level, they will coordinate and promote the development of CM in Hong Kong. They're also responsible for monitoring the various CM-related policies and resource allocation. The CM unit is also responsible for communicating and coordinating the work of the CM sector and stakeholders. We also have a Chinese Medicine Development Committee. Under that, there is the Chinese CM Practice Subcommittee and the CM Industry Subcommittee. They are chaired by experts in the sector, and I am the chairman of this committee. So we have regular meetings to discuss various issues, and then we will take on board the views of the sector, so that we could promote the development of CM. So we'll be actively promoting such development, and of course we are going to strengthen our services. I mentioned our development on 3 areas. I understand members are very keen on CM development, so we will be regularly reporting such developments. Thank you.
Question number 5, Mr. Tang Fei. President, the National 14th Five-Year Plan has expressed clear support for Hong Kong to develop into international innovation and technology hub. On IT development, will government inform this council one of the latest plans and measures put in place to achieve the goal of developing Hong Kong into an INT hub, and whether clear performance indicators have been formulated? 2. In respect of nurturing INT talents, as there are views that STEM education is not an independent subject in primary and secondary schools, which has resulted in insufficient lesson time and difficulties in articulation into university. Whether the government will improve STEM education in primary and secondary schools, if so, of the details and timetable. 3. Of the measures put in place in the past 2 years to deepen the INT cooperation with the mainland, including facilitating young people to go into the mainland for participating in INT development. SIT. Our reply to Mr. Tang's question is as follows. Promulgated last year, the 14th Five-Year Plan supported Hong Kong to develop into an INT hub. The government has been attaching great importance to the development of INT and set out 8 major areas in the policy address to develop INT, formulated clear policies and put forward measures. In the same year, the government has also adopted the recommendations of the Advisory Committee on Innovation and Technology to establish KPIs. In the past 5 years, the government has unprecedentedly invested over $150 billion to support INT development. Various initiatives are gradually taking effect. For example, the gross domestic expenditure on R&D has increased by more than 45%. The number of startups rose from around 1,500 in 2015 to 4,000 in 2021. The venture capital investment increased from $3.4 billion to over $40 billion. We've also witnessed the birth of more than 10 unicorns in the same period. The flagship project, Hong Kong Research Clusters, has successfully attracted over 30 well-renowned universities and research institutes to collaborate with local partners in setting up 28 research laboratories. Hong Kong also ranked first in Asia and second in the world in 2021 World Digital Competitiveness Ranking. In the 2021 policy address and 2022-23 budget, the government has put forward forward-looking and groundbreaking initiatives. In terms of land supply, having regard to the continuous increase in demand for land, the government is continuing to increase infrastructure, including consolidating the Hong Kong-Shenzhen Innovation and Technology Park in the Lok Ma Chau Loop and areas around Lok Ma Chau Santin to form the Santin Technopole, building the landmark and I&T facilities with a scale comparable to Cyberport. Ma Liu Shui Reclamation, providing land to universities for R&D use. As for talent, the government has been adopting a multi-pronged approach to enlarge the talent pool. For example, the Global STEM Professorship Scheme, which has attracted over 60 outstanding scholars to Hong Kong. In terms of R&D, to complement the development of frontier fields such as life and health discipline, the government earmarked 10 billion to support the development of life and health scientific research, including the InnoLife Health Hub in HSITP. The government also doubled the annual funding support under the I&T Fund for the 16 state key laboratories and 6 Hong Kong branches of the Chinese National Engineering Research Centers, and set up dedicated funds to finance local universities to participate in national R&D projects. The government will update KPIs timely and enhance more measures in line with the development. According to information provided by EDB, the government has been committed to promoting STEM education in primary and secondary schools through renewal of curriculum, enhancement of teacher training, providing resource support and lifelong learning activities to cultivate students' creativity, scientific investigation, problem-solving skills from an early age. In addition to learning in the science, technology, mathematics, and primary general studies, students also participate in STEM-related hands-on and minds-on activities. These activities help them lay a solid foundation. Schools are now implementing STEM education progressively and have achieved considerable results. For senior secondary electives, STEM-related subjects have all along been popular. More applied learning courses on applied science and technology have been provided. The government will continue to follow up on the recommendation of the Standing Committee on STEM Education to provide schools with various support measures. Starting from 2019-20, the EDB has provided life-wide learning grant with an annual provision of $900 million for schools to support them in taking forward more life-wide learning activities, including STEM education. The Quality Education Fund has included STEM education as one of the priority themes, and from 2018-19, 2020-21 school years, approved $800 million for around 840 projects related to information technology in education and STEM education. 3. Thanks to the country's staunch support for the I&T in Hong Kong, the 14th Five-Year Plan for the first time incorporated the Shenzhen Hong Kong Innovation and Technology Cooperation Zone, comprising HSITP and the Shenzhen Innovation Technology Zone, as one of the 4 major platforms of cooperation in the GPA. Last year, Hong Kong signed Memorandum of Cooperation with Sichuan, Hubei, and Shanghai to deepen the cooperation between Hong Kong and various provinces, such as promoting the commercialization of R&D results and exploring the mechanism for jointly nurturing I&T talents. To better leverage the complementary advantages, the government is actively facilitating the effective flow of innovative elements within the mainland. On the talent front, the government has encouraged young people to seize the opportunity through the GPA Youth Employment Scheme. So far, over 250 enterprises have provided INT jobs benefiting 300 graduates. The government will explore the extension of the immigration arrangement for non-local graduates. As for funding, over 760 million from the mainland were approved for local universities and R&D institutions. The government has also implemented joint funding schemes with the central government. In terms of resources, 4 mainland branches established by Hong Kong universities were approved by the Ministry of Science and Technology as pilot units, which were able to lodge applications for exporting human genetic resources to Hong Kong for research. The delegation for introducing the 14 five-year plan suggested at the seminar last year to make good use of Hong Kong's unique advantages to develop the international INT hub and announce a number of measures benefiting Hong Kong. For instance, regarding opening up more national level science and technology program to Hong Kong, the National Key Research and Development Program, the SciTech Innovation 2030, Bring Science and Bring Like Research major project were opened. Besides, the government and Hong Kong and Shenzhen have signed a cooperation agreement on developing cooperation zone. The Hong Kong Science and Technology Parks also launched the GPA Inno Academy and GPA Inno Express in July this year. We look forward to further support to take forward the INT development in Hong Kong. Mr. Tang Fei, the Secretary, said that through the GPA YES, 250 enterprises have provided more than 300 graduates the job opportunities. But there are so many university graduates every year. As far as the government is concerned, what measures are there to promote INT development while providing job opportunities for the young people in order for them to have better upward mobility opportunity? Secretary, thanks very much, Mr. Tang. Because of COVID, the GPA Youth Employment Scheme has involved less students than anticipated. However, we will explore new measures to help the young people in Hong Kong to develop their business in the GPA. In fact, in the past, we understand that in terms of INT development, we have to lure talents, we have to nurture talents. So for young people in Hong Kong, like Mr. Tang Fei said, we have to lure the graduates to stay in the INT sector. And we have this internship program. Some people reminded me that some undergraduates who are studying INT in universities would be lured by finance, tourism, or logistics and leave the INT sector. I think we have to attract these young people. Now, this internship program means that during the summer or winter holidays, they will be funded to join an internship program for them to understand more about INT and to nurture their interest. 4,700 students have taken part in just a couple of years. More than 1,000 companies are taking part. So both the employers and the young people are really enthusiastic about this program. And from the questionnaire survey, we find that they're full of support of this program. We will continue to promote this to nurture more interest on the part of young people in INT. Mr. Jeffrey Lam. In Singapore, the government is proactively developing INT industry, and they have rolled out measures to lure global talents. For Hong Kong to become an international INT hub, I think there is a lot of catching up to do, like taxation and land policy. There ought to be more competitive measures to entice the talents and funding to come to Hong Kong. Now, in the Lok Ma Chau Loop area, we have the INT Park, and it will be completed starting from 2024 progressively. Now, what sort of criteria for application? We still haven't heard anything about it. Will the administration tell us today about these criteria? If you don't have the information today, perhaps you should let us know more conditions about the land grant and also the priority and so on. Secretary, thanks very much, Mr. Lam. Mr. Lam is right in his observation. For Hong Kong to develop INT, the land supply, the infrastructure, the taxation, we have to come into it to make sure that investors will be incentivized to do so. Now, Mr. Lam mentioned the Loop area. We do see the need for INT enterprises to be given every support. So we are working very hard. By the end of 2024, the HS ITP in the Loop will be progressively be coming on stream. As Mr. Lam understands, we do have the renting arrangement, which has not been announced. In this Loop area, we attach a lot of importance to the support for INT. We do have the wet lab in the area. We will have sufficient facilities to support high-end technology like health and life and microelectronics and so on. These are the areas we focus our attention on. And of course, we will listen to the sector to make sure that in our infrastructure, we will be enticing people to establish their presence in the Loop area. The Loop has the great advantage of being close to Shenzhen. So other than local enterprises, we will be liaising with the Shenzhen and other areas to see how we can make the best use of the Loop area. Mr. Jimmy, Chairman. The government said that under the INT fund, there are various initiatives, and they are listed out in the budget. Now, the indications are not the same as the KPI proposed by the C-elect. The government really reports the number of supports, the funding to show what they have done. It's not so much quality kind of KPIs. In terms of commercialization of R&D, how much wealth has been created, how many job opportunities have been created, I think the community ought to know about them. So will the government review the INT fund and really set up some KPIs? Secretary, thank you, Mr. Ng. In terms of the funding arrangement, we do have KPIs to measure the success. Overall, in taking forward the INT, as I said in the principal reply in 2017, we have adopted the advice of the advisory committee and set up some metrics which are more broadly based, like how much contribution to the economy and so on. Like one of the main metrics refers to the number of jobs. Now, in 2014, it was 30,000, and the number will go up to 40,600 in a couple of years. Now, we do have all these KPIs for us to measure up to, and we do have these metrics to measure. In 2020, for instance, and it is 42,600, and we are hitting 45,000 already. And there is another metric, like investment in the startups. Our target in 2020 is 3 billion, but compared with 2014, it was 1.2 billion. We have multiple increase, and now it is $47 billion, which is has vastly exceeded the level indicated in the KPI. The different programs do have their own KPIs. Mr. Ng has got a point there. I think we have to look at the results and see what contribution is being made to society and the number of jobs and so on. We will be deepening the KPIs to make sure that they can truly reflect I&T's contribution to Hong Kong's economy. Mr. Michael Tin. President, the 14th Five-Year Plan supports Hong Kong to become an international I&T hub. There will be a lot of inventions, a lot of trademarks and patents. We have to safeguard all these IP property to encourage people to come to Hong Kong. The IP right is territorial, and it would be protected by the territory in which it is registered. Hong Kong is an inalienable part of China, and the patent registered in mainland cannot be protected in Hong Kong. The same can be said about trademarks. And if a trademark is used first, then you will be able to get the protection. Michael Jordan's brand lost a lawsuit in the mainland. For Hong Kong to become an international I&T hub, I think we need to count on the vast market in the mainland. This is the selling point for the investors. If we have a legislative regime that can mutually recognize the IP rights between Hong Kong and the mainland, then it will certainly be contributing a lot to Hong Kong being developed in this direction. So will there be any mutual recognition system for patents and trademarks? If not, why not? Secretary, President, Mr. Tin's comments are really true. The IP right protection is something that we enjoy. It is an advantage for Hong Kong and one country, two systems in terms of IP protection and international connectivity. We do enjoy the unique advantage, and we can make contribution in our cooperation with the mainland cities. So it is important for us to consider how best we can strengthen this advantage. So for the IP protection regime, we do have the local registration system. Under the one country, two systems, we have our own IP registration regime. I fully appreciate what Mr. Tin said. The country is a vast market. How can we make sure that through the I&T development, we can be part of the mainland market? So we would support the I&T personnel to apply for the patent in the mainland. Now, how can we deepen the mutual recognition of patent between the two places? That the IPD is considering this at the right time. I will be bringing Mr. Tin up to speed. I don't have the information with me right now. I'm sure that we have to make the most of our IP regime, and we have to strengthen our unique position. Now, with a unique registration IP regime, then mainland investors can obtain the IP right in Hong Kong and then move out of Hong Kong.
Last question seeking oral reply. Mr. Andrew Lam. Which question did he not answer?
I didn't quite hear the question. I will call upon the IPD to supplement the information, please.
Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you, President. Do you have your microphone on? Yes. Please continue. To strengthen the support for waste reduction and recycling at the district level, the Environmental Protection Department is implementing a community recycling network, namely Greenet Community, to promote different initiatives across the territory, which comprise recycling stations, recycling stores, and recycling spots. There are reviews pointing out that with nearly 1.3 million public housing households in Hong Kong, the provision of more such recycling facilities at the relevant housing estates will significantly enhance the effectiveness of waste reduction and recycling work. Regarding the implementation of Greenet Community at public housing estates, will the government inform this council, given that some districts are currently not provided with recycling stations, whether the government will set up such facilities at locations in the vicinity of PHEs in these districts and organize relevant public education activities through such facilities in preparation for the implementation of the municipal solid waste charging? If so, with the details, if not, the reasons for that. 2. Whether it will set up recycling stores and recycling spots at PHEs, if so, of their coverage and the timetable, if not, the reasons for that. And 3. Whether it will expeditiously introduce into PHE smart reverse vending machines so as to dovetail with the implementation of Greenet Community and other related measures, if so, of the timetable, if not, for the reasons for that. Secretary for the Environment. President, in order to assist and encourage the public in actively practicing waste reduction and recycling, as well as to complement the future implementation of municipal solid waste (MSW) charging, the EPD has been enhancing the support on waste reduction and recycling at district level, including sustained expansion and upgrading of the community recycling network Greenet Community. Currently, Greenet Community comprises facilities at 3 levels, including recycling stations with largest areas, indoor and outdoor space for environmental education use, recycling stores usually locating closer to residents, and recycling spots which operate weekly at fixed locations and time in the form of curbside collection booths. As at the end of April 2022, there are 11 recycling stations, 32 recycling stores, and over 120 recycling spots. That is over 160 collection spots in total under the Greenet Community. All recycling points under Greenet Community collect at least 8 common recyclables, including waste paper, plastics, metals, glass containers, fluorescent lamps and tubes, rechargeable batteries, small electrical appliances, and regulated electrical equipment, and provide green dollar to encourage more members of the public to practice source separation of more types of recyclables for turning them into resources. All facilities under Greenet Community are operated by non-profit-making organizations which provide various kinds of environmental education activities such as upcycling workshops, second-hand markets, briefings on environmental information to encourage the public to establish green living habit. Greenet Community also makes good use of technology. Starting from end of 2020 under a pilot on smart cycling systems, we have been testing smart recycling systems such as smart balances, smart recycling bins, gift redemption units, etc., with Internet of Things as skeleton technology for local application and assessment of its benefits. In addition to sustained upgrading of Greenet Community services in all 18 districts in the territory, the EPD has also been promoting the program on source separation of domestic waste at residential estates and buildings through provision of recycling bins to facilitate residents to practice recycling conveniently. Over 30% of Hong Kong's population lives in PRH. Therefore, the EPD has been closely collaborating with the Hong Kong Housing Authority to enhance community recycling and environmental education support in PRH. Our reply to the questions raised by Mr. Lam is as follows. 1. On recycling stations, Green at Wong Tai Sin at Po Kong Village Road will commence construction in mid-2022. In addition, the Invigorating Island South initiative has also identified preliminary a piece of land at Ap Lei Jiao for development of another recycling station, namely Green at Southern. For those 5 districts which currently do not have any recycling stations, that is Central and Western, Yau Tzi Mong, Kowloon City, Tsuen Wan, and North District, there are 13 recycling stores within the districts to provide residents with environmental education and recycling support. In addition to community environmental education activities organized through the Greenet community, the EPD has been organizing waste reduction and recycling activities for PRH in collaboration with the Housing Authority with a view to strengthen the environmental awareness of residents in PRH. The EPD Green Outreach has already extended its outreach service to all 18 districts in Hong Kong, including PRH, to provide on-site technical and educational support on waste reduction and recycling, enhance effectiveness of recycling arrangement in estates, help identify proper outlets for recyclables, etc., to community stakeholders such as resident organizations and property management companies. To get prepared for the implementation of MSW charging, the EPD and the HKHA have also collaborated since end of 2018 in launching trial projects in PRH in phases to cover about 150 PRH blocks in Hong Kong. The first two phases of trial projects covering a total of 53 PRH blocks have been concluded. The third phase, covering a total of 51 PRH blocks, commenced in January of this year and is planned for completion in 9 months. However, it was suspended due to severe epidemic situation. With the recent relaxation of social distance restriction measures, the third phase of trial projects has progressively resumed and will complete in November of this year. The fourth phase, covering a total of about 50 PRH blocks, will commence at the end of this year, right after the completion of the third phase. 2. All PRH in Hong Kong have joined the program on source separation of domestic waste launched by the EPD. The HKHA requires its cleansing contractors to send various kinds of clean recyclables to downstream recyclers for proper recycling and conservation of valuable resources. In response to the change in recycling markets in recent years, the EPD is liaising with the HKHA in connection with a new service on one-stop collection of recyclables, especially those with low market value such as plastics, glass containers, fluorescent lamps and tubes, rechargeable batteries, etc., from PRH by EPD's operators to help ensure that all recyclables will be properly treated and recycled. Separately, the operators of Greenet community have already set up some recycling spots at or near PRH. Currently, about 80 PRH estates are covered by Greenet community collection points. At the same time, HKHA is in discussion with EPD on suitable locations in PRH within a pilot district for setting up a network of several mini recycling stores. Considering and suiting the spatial characteristics of PRH, and these mini recycling stores will help promote and support more PRH residents in establishing a clean recycling habit. With the support of the Housing Authority, EPD has preliminarily identified more than 10 PRH set up a network of smart recycling application points which will progressively take place from the second half of 2022. Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you, President. Thank you, Secretary, for your reply. I'm very happy to hear that PRH across Hong Kong has already joined in the program on source separation of domestic waste. Well, the Greenet community services only cover about 80 PRH estates right now. And you said that the Housing Authority is still working with EPD to look into identifying suitable locations in a pilot district. So are you saying that you are trying to identify a spot? What kind of pilot trial are you launching? What are some of the difficulties you encounter in recycling collection? Secretary. Thank you. I thank you for your interest in the recycling network. It is covering about 30% of PRH estates, which is very meaningful. So all along, the EPD has been working together with the HKHA on the pilot scheme. We know that PRH estates are looking into clean recycling, and it covers 8 recyclables. You can also receive green dollars. We want to encourage more people to bring out their containers for recycling. For some of the PRH that has a suitable open space, we would like to open up some recycling stores or spots. Well, we can actually pick a size of a shop suitable for us to use. However, we know that there may be certain limitations to PRH estates. Therefore, we need to first identify a suitable spot which can provide us with a space to educate the public and also to set up recycling spots. We hope that we'll be able to roll this out as soon as possible. Mr. Dennis Leung. Thank you, President. So the Secretary has talked about clean recycling. We'll also need to look into kitchen waste recycling. Can the Secretary also tell us more about that? Secretary, thank you for asking about that. We do have restrictions in Hong Kong in terms of collecting kitchen waste. We have to ensure that we'll be able to handle it in the downstream. Hong Kong is a densely populated city. To try to transfer waste into energy is still something we need to work on in Hong Kong. So currently in the northern side of Lantau Island, we can handle about 200 tons of kitchen waste per year. And our second plant is in the northern district, which is still under construction. However, they cannot cater to the demand of all the kitchen waste in Hong Kong. We need to apply more technology in dealing with that. So we're now discussing with the drainage services department to try to use silt, to put silt together with kitchen waste and then to generate energy from that. So we are now working on it as a pilot scheme, and once we have more experience, we'll be able to be more successful. And so we are trying to expand our scope, and we're trying to collect kitchen waste in the larger public housing estates. Recently, in one large housing estate with over dozens of blocks, we have set up a kitchen waste recycling machine to encourage the public to do more recycling. And we hope that we'll be able to expand our coverage in Hong Kong. We also work with different groups and organizations to also set up collection points in malls. So this will be one of our important tasks to try to generate energy from our kitchen waste. Mr. Tony Zek. Thank you, President. President, I am in support of generating energy from waste. Therefore, there is a need to increase our recycling collection spots. There should be a lot of public space in PRH estates that are not being used. But the problem is whether HKHA is willing to do so. My question to the Secretary is on newly built PRH estates. Would you, in the design, require such facilities to be included? If so, when would these facilities be able to be made for use, and if not, what are the reasons for not doing so? Secretary, we have spent some time thinking over it. In housing estates, whether it be public or private, mainly only recycle the basics, plastics, glass, and metal. And recently we've added in glass container recycling as well. We do want to recycle our waste, such as kitchen waste. It may not be suitable to the environment to recycle it at every floor. In Europe and in the United States and even in Korea, they would set up a space on the ground floor, so much like our green stores, so that people will be able to recycle and also separate the waste and have them recycled in a clean manner. For newly built estates, we hope that when they could also include it in the design. The Housing Authority will consult with professionals. My understanding is that it will begin next month. And with the support of the sector, the guidelines will be launched next month. New estates will have the flexibility to not only set recycling bins on each floor, instead to set up this green recycling stores or spots on the ground floor for better recycling. Ms. Judy Chen. Thank you, President. I'm happy to see the success of Green Community, especially in terms of education. I'm also concerned with kitchen waste. In 2020, there are around 350 tons of such waste per day. So that's 30% of municipal solid waste, out of which 2,477 tons comes from domestic use or from households. Before we have a good downstream industry, should we also promote more education for greener community? And Ms. Chen, you have already asked your question. Can you please tell us about the effectiveness and to see whether we can also recycle our kitchen waste at home? Thank you, President. So for such food waste, we need to educate the public to tell people not to order too much food. So we have already cut down such waste by 10% in recent years, and we really must try to cut down waste at its origin. In Hong Kong, in such a densely populated area, we do encounter challenges. On one hand, we need to try to recycle our kitchen waste, such as in Old Park 1 and 2, and to work together to try to integrate silt with kitchen waste to generate it into power. This will help us save energy and also let us have more renewable sources of energy and to reach carbon neutrality. In recent years, we have been using smart recycling machines to ensure a clean environment whilst recycling waste. One large housing estate has already launched this as a pilot scheme. In the second half of the year, we would also include some public housing estates so that we can accumulate more experience and to try to do more clean recycling instead of just trying to cutting down the waste at its origin. Mr. Kwok Kwai Kang, thank you. Next year, we would see there would be a good opportunity for us to break through the bottleneck and to ensure that there will be sustainable development in Hong Kong. You might have all noticed that households in PRH actually account for over 1/3 of the entire population in Hong Kong, with about 72 million people. So this is actually very important for us to launch recycling. We have already completed 2 phases, and the 3rd phase will begin soon, with the 4th phase beginning at the end of the year. So are we all prepared for the trial projects? How can we ensure that our cross-departmental cooperation can actually reach its full capacity? I will try to answer your question, and then I would ask the Undersecretary for Transport and Housing to supplement. The trial project is a 4-phase project. So this will actually cover highly populated areas. We have seen positive feedback in our initial trials because it can really help us with recycling. So we are looking into not only extending it to other public housing estates, we're also going to extend it to other areas to try to accumulate more experience. We have also set up a committee to discuss this further. We hope that by mid next year, we'll be able to have Hong Kong prepared to try to work on clean recycling. Perhaps the Undersecretary for Transport and Housing can supplement. Please be concise. Thank you, President. Other than launching trial projects, the HKHK also works in education, because we understand that the success of any project is attributed to the support of members of the public. We'll be able to share this further with you in the future, and with more promotion and education, we hope that people will all support our trial. Thank you.
Government bills, first reading. Residential Care Homes Legislation Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2022. Occupational Safety and Occupational Health Legislation Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2022. Second reading. Secretary for Labour and Welfare. President, I move the second reading of the Residential Care Homes Legislation Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2022. The bill seeks to enhance the quality of residential care homes for the elderly and residential care homes for persons with disabilities. In response to the public call for enhancing the regulation and quality of residential care homes, RCH, the Social Welfare Department, SWD, set up the working group on the review of ordinances and codes of practice for residential care homes in June 2017 to review the Residential Care Homes Elderly Persons Ordinance Cap 459, the Residential Care Homes Persons with Disabilities Ordinance Cap 1613, and the relevant subsidiary legislation and codes of practice. The working group held 90 meetings and completed a review in May 2019. It put forward 19 recommendations. SWD took forward some of the recommendations by revising the relevant codes of practice, which took effect on the 1st of January 2020. Some other recommendations confirmed that the prevailing requirements did not require any changes. The remaining recommendations have to be implemented by amending the legislation mentioned. Members of the working group include legislators, service users and carers, representatives of non-government organizations and private organizations which operate RCH, scholars and others. The working group discussed an array of issues under review, many of which were controversial. On the one hand, the working group hoped to improve the service quality of RCH by setting higher requirements through legislative amendments. On the other, the working group had to consider the practicability of the proposals, increase in operating costs of RCH and reduction in RCH places. The working group may have taken some 2 years to complete the review. It set the direction for legislative amendments in a number of important areas. Taking this opportunity, I would like to express express my gratitude to members of the working group who represented different stakeholders with different philosophies. The outcome was achieved through mutual understanding and accommodation. Having regard to the working group's recommendations, SWD's practical experience in regulating RCH operation and various stakeholders' views, we propose legislative amendments to the above-mentioned legislation to enhance the quality of RCH in 8 aspects. 1. A. Enhancing the minimum staffing requirements. B. Increasing the minimum area of floor space for residency. Strengthening the accountability of RCH operators. D. Introducing a registration system for home managers. E. Improving the registration system for healthcare workers. F. Enhancing the regulation of medicine management, use of restraints, and protection of residents' dignity and privacy. G. Raising penalties. And H. Repealing the certificate of exemption regime for RCHEs. To allow the sector sufficient time for transition to the new regulatory regime, the new requirements will be implemented in phases if the bill is passed by this Council. The majority of the new requirements will be implemented starting from the first anniversary of Gazetto of the Amendment Ordinance material date, save for those requirements for enhancing staffing an area of floor space per resident, which will have a longer transition period. In view of the tight supply of nurses, we have taken on board the views of the sector and proposed the requirement that there must be one nurse and one health worker on duty at the same time for at least 8 hours daily be implemented in phases. Specifically, RCH with more than 60 residents must meet the requirement starting from the second anniversary of the material date, while RCH with 60 residents or fewer must meet the requirement on a date to be appointed by the Secretary for Labour and Welfare. To relieve the manpower shortage, the government will continue to implement measures such as the enrolled nurse training program for the welfare sector and increasing the supply of nurses for the welfare sector. It is also proposed in the bill to increase in 2 phases the minimum area of floor space per resident in RCH. The transition will be completed in 8 years starting from the material date. The existing legislation only provides for a minimum area of floor space per resident of 6.5 square meters. The bill allows high care level RCH to increase the minimum area of floor space per resident to 8 square meters in 4 years and to 9.5 square meters in 8 years. Existing medium and low-level care RCH will have 8 years to meet the new requirement of 8 square meters of floor space per resident. At present, around 460 RCH do not meet the new requirement. They need to reduce the number of places by around 6,300, as there are about 8,700 vacant places in the market that meet the new requirement. The amendments will not deprive residents currently living in these RCH of residential care. The transitional arrangement will allow existing RCH to meet the new requirement through natural attrition, gradual reduction of places, necessary modification works, or relocation. We briefed the panel on welfare services, as well as the panel on welfare services and panel on health services joint subcommittee on long-term care policy of the last Legislative Council on the working group's recommendations on the 15th of April 2019 and the 23rd of June 2020, respectively. We also consulted the Elderly Commission, the Rehabilitation Advisory Committee, and the Social Welfare Advisory Committee in the second half of 2019 on the recommendations and organized 4 engagement sessions with stakeholders in the first half of 2020. The advisory committees and stakeholders generally agreed on the need to enhance the quality of RCH. In February 2022, we consulted the panel on welfare services and members generally supported the legislative proposals. The government will give full support to the scrutiny work of the Council and hope members will support and pass the bill. President, I so submit. Thank you. I now propose a question to you that the aforesaid bill be read the second time in accordance with the rules of procedure. The second reading debate is adjourned and the bill is referred to the House Committee.
Secretary for Labour and Welfare. President, I move the second reading of the Occupational Safety and Occupational Health Legislation Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2022. The bill seeks to amend the Factories and Industrial Undertakings Ordinance and the Occupational Safety and Health Ordinance to give employees better occupational safety and health protection. Whilst we have seen steady improvements in occupational safety and health over the years. The improvement trend has tapered in recent years. Fatal industrial accidents remain high. The number has been hovering around 20 cases a year for the past decade, with no sign of decline. The community generally considered one of the reasons is the sentences have been on the low side and not much of a deterrent effect to curb the offences. Besides, the OSH penalties, which have not been reviewed for well over 20 years, are lower than those in other developed jurisdictions. For those reasons, we have comprehensively reviewed the OSH penalty regime of the OSH legislation and revised the maximum fines of the legislation. There are 650 summary offences in above two ordinances. The administration has reviewed the maximum fines to ensure they will be commensurate with the seriousness of the offences and will achieve a deterrent effect. The amendments include 1. For summary general duty offences, the maximum fines for employer GD provisions and employee GD provisions will be increased to $3 million and $150,000 respectively. 2. The seriousness levels of the summary offences and the maximum fines will be realigned. For employer-related offences, the maximum fines, depending on the seriousness, will be $25,000, $100,000, and $400,000, whereas the employee-related offences, the maximum fines, will be $10,000, $50,000, and $150,000. At present, the time bar for issuing summonses of summary offences is 6 months. We propose that it be extended to 1 year so as to allow sufficient time to conduct more in-depth investigations into those serious cases and provide the courts with sufficient evidence for considering whether immediate imprisonment penalty is warranted. One key proposal in the bill is to introduce penalties with sufficient deterrent effect of very serious OSH offences. We propose to amend the general duty provisions for employers, proprietors, and occupiers of premises and make them triable as indictable offences so the extremely serious OSH breaches can be put on trial at a higher level of courts. We also propose that the maximum fines for imprisonment terms be pitched at $10 million and 2 years respectively. Under the bill, the courts are required to take into account companies' turnover and, having regard to their scale of operation, impose a fine that has sufficient deterrent effect. The above provisions are merely targeting the small number of cases involving gross neglect of duties and very high culpability that led to very serious consequences, including employees' death. The government made a commitment in 2017 policy address to review the penalty regimes of relevant OSH legislation. We have conducted multiple consultations. The business and labor sectors generally agreed that there was a need to increase the penalties to enhance the deterrent effect, but there were diverse opinions on the magnitude. In formulating the proposals, we've considered the opinions that have been received. I urge members to support and pass the bill as soon as possible to accord employees better OSH protection. Subject to the passage of the bill, we will bring it into effect on the date it is gazetted.
I now propose a question to you that the aforesaid bill be read the second time. In accordance with the rules of procedure, the second reading debate is adjourned and the bill is referred to the House Committee. Government motion. Proposed resolution under the Disability Discrimination Ordinance. Members who wish to speak, please press the Request to Speak button. I now call upon the Secretary for Labor and Welfare to speak and move the motion. President, I move that the motion as printed on the agenda be passed. I now propose the question to you that the Secretary's motion be passed. Does any member wish to speak? If not, we now proceed with the voting. I put the question to you that the Secretary's motion be